Anti-D Law welcomes you to the 7-day course for the LSAT-India. In this course, you will receive 7 lessons each for logical reasoning, analytical reasoning, and reading comprehension. So let's begin with today's lecture. Today's lesson is AR4, the 4th session on analytical reasoning. Alright, so take a moment, pause the video, and try to make some sense of these common directions that are given for the questions from question number 19 to question number 22. So as you know that these directions are the ones that are common. Remember that the directions that are given within a question, let's say for example 19, there's something that says that perhaps if meditation begins before something else, gymnastics or whatever. These directions here in question number 19 do not apply to say question number 20, 21 or any other question, right? So these are the ones that are specific to the questions themselves, right? You do not carry these to any other question. However, these directions are common to all. Therefore, we first make some sense of these common directions, get an idea, condense it in our head in some way so that we have a certain sense of what the common directions are, and then we attempt the questions one by one. Alright, so take a moment and read this by yourself. Try to tabulate it in some manner. Try to get a couple of figures and a couple of diagrams or a couple of flowcharts that encapsulate what you learn from here, and take a moment, take 2 minutes if you should, and then we'll proceed with this together. Alright, so I think I hope you'd pause the video and try it by your own self. We'll have a look at it together now. So as you can see, it talks about Tuesday evenings every single time, Tuesday's schedule, which means you need not factor in this thing about Tuesday, you see, because everything that is spoken of is about Tuesday only, right? So Tuesday is not a variable, Tuesday is constant, right? And if it is constant, we needn't write this down, we needn't factor this in when we make our table. That's the first thing. Okay, let's look at the next thing that we see. We have 6 kinds of classes. As you can see, we have gymnastics, jazz, kung fu, meditation, tennis and yoga. All right, so since you can see that each one of them starts with a different alphabet, you can write them as gymnastics, jazz, kung fu, meditation, tennis and yoga. Okay, you can just use the first alphabet. The other thing that you see is that these are scheduled for exactly 1 hour in 4 time slots: 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. And on any given evening, on any given Tuesday evening, you have 1 session of each of the following, which means that you have 6 kinds of sessions, each of which would be given, and you have only 4 time slots, right? The time slots are 4, the number of activities are 6, which means that there will have to be some time slots wherein there is more than one activity. Like for example, let's say at 6 o'clock there might be gymnastics as well as kung fu perhaps, or at 8 o'clock there may be meditation, tennis or whatever. What I mean to say is that you need to understand from this pattern that there are 6 here and 4 here. That simply means that there has to be at least 1 session wherein more than one course, more than 1 session of these is offered, right? There has to be at least 1 time slot in which more than 1 of these classes is offered. Okay, so we've understood a bit about the structure as well. Now let's look at the rules and add the details to it. Okay, so we'll look at the conditions. Let's start with the first condition, this one. It says yoga begins later than jazz dance. So yoga begins later than jazz dance means that jazz dance is before yoga. Okay, but no later than kung fu. Now what is the meaning of this no later than? Okay, now the meaning of no later than means that it is either earlier or it is at the same time. This is very important. No later than does not just mean earlier, it also implies this. It is so therefore, if instead of saying that yoga begins later than dance and earlier than kung fu would have meant that the possibility of the same time is not there. So when you say no later than, it means it can also begin at the same time. So let's also put this thing into a figure in a certain way. I'll add this detail back into this figure. So as I can say that, so yoga begins later than jazz, but no later than Kung Fu, which means Kung Fu can either be here along with it, or Kung Fu can be below it in terms of time. Now, as you can see, I can't write 5, 6 or 7. I cannot write the time here because this is not given in terms of time. This is just giving me a hierarchy. That's the first point. The second thing is that there's a difference between something being later versus something being immediately later. It's a very important difference, a very important point. What is the difference between something being later and something being immediately later? Let us say at 5 o'clock you have a certain activity. Let's say you have gymnastics, okay, and at 6 o'clock you have Kung Fu, and at 7 o'clock you have jazz. I'm just giving you an example here. This is not anything from the facts. Now, jazz is later than gymnastics because, as you can see, 7 o'clock is after 5 o'clock, but it is not immediately later than gymnastics because there is Kung Fu in between. So when you look at Kung Fu and gymnastics, gymnastics is immediately before Kung Fu and Kung Fu is immediately after gymnastics. But when I say later or before, that could mean there's a gap of 2, there could be a gap of 3 as well. Something could be starting at 8. So you must remember the difference between these two words, not just for this question, but for any question on analytical reasoning, logical reasoning, and even in reading comprehension. Because like I always stress, it is important for you to know the exact meaning of words. You're not tested in terms of great vocabulary. What is required of you is to understand the precise meaning of words. All right. So we have this first set of data from here that let me just write it a little smaller for you, or perhaps I can write it down. So the first set of details that we get is that yoga begins later than jazz dance, which means jazz will be above, and then you'd have yoga here, and Kung Fu can either be here or here. That's the first detail that we get. Now let's look at our second rule. It says that meditation begins at the same time as exactly one other introductory class. If you noticed, I said that since we have 4 time slots and 6 activities, it means that with at least some time slots there will have to be multiple things, right? Or perhaps there might have to be 3. You never know. We have to see those details later on, but we do know that 2 activities can happen or will have to happen simultaneously. So in that context, what you're told in the second rule is that meditation begins with one more, which means that if there is meditation here, there will be one more alongside it, and only one more. This is the meaning of exactly one more. Let's say if I say meditation begins with one more, it could have meant that meditation begins with 2, and I can say meditation begins with one more. But when I say exactly one more, it means that neither less nor more than 1, exactly 1. So what we know about meditation is that wherever you see meditation, there would be one more along with it. So let me tabulate this one also here. So if there is meditation, I am certain that there is one more thing along with it. Okay. Let's look at our next rule, this one, that no other introductory class begins at the same time as gymnastics. Now, just as we saw that meditation must compulsorily have one with it, gymnastics, according to this point, is that gymnastics would be alone, which means that if there is gymnastics here, there will be nothing along with it. Okay, so let's just write that down. Gymnastics is accompanied by nobody. All right, now let's look at the last rule. It says that at the most, one of the introductory classes begins later than gymnastics, which means that let us say this is the time slots. Okay, I can't give it a time, that's why I'm just drawing it here for the sake of that. Let us say if gymnastics has begun here. Okay, obviously nothing is here alongside it. Now here you can either have it says at the most 1. At the most 1 means either 0, which means either none, or it can be 1. That's what at the most 1 means. So either you can have 1 here. Let's say for example you can put say jazz perhaps. Okay, I'm giving you an example, this is not jazz, but I'm just saying that perhaps you can have jazz here, but you cannot have two things. Like you can't have jazz and kung fu, because that would make it two things. So either it has to be final, which means that either you put your gymnastics at the very end, because when gymnastics is at the end, it means there is nothing after it, right? Which is okay, because it can be none. Or if gymnastics is not at the end, then at the most there can be one thing after it, which means that, let us say we have gymnastics here, then there is scope for only one more thing. So let us tabulate this as well, and then we've understood as to what the common rules are. So the next common rule, which relates to G again, is that after G there is at most one. Okay, now that we have these, let us go and look at the questions individually and see as to what we can do with them. Take a moment, pause the video and try solving this question by your own self, and then we'll do it together. In the meantime, I'd also like you to think about something. There are two kinds of ways to approach a question, right? The first way is that you could anticipate the answer, which means that you read the question stem, which is the question, and then you anticipate as to what the answer could be, and then you look for that in the 4 options or the 5 options that you have, right? That is what is anticipation. The second method would be the method of elimination. What that means is that you don't bring an anticipation with you. You look at the options and you try to negate them. So you're like, okay, let me look at option A. Okay, does it work? Option B doesn't work. Option C, well, this works. Let me keep it. Option D doesn't work. Option E doesn't work. Okay, C is the answer. This is the method of elimination. So you need to develop the skill of knowing as to when you must use anticipation and when you must use elimination. So when you look at this question now, take a moment to see whether you want to use the method of anticipation or the method of elimination. That's the second thing that I want you to do. So take a moment and try to figure out as to what you think is more suitable for this question, and then we'll solve this question together. Okay, so what I'd suggest here is to use the method of elimination, right? It's quite obvious, because what you have to do here is that you are saying which of these could be an accurate schedule. Now, what is the meaning of the difference between a could be question versus a must be question? When you have a could be question, you look for a possibility, okay? And when you have to negate, when you have to eliminate a could be option, you look for an option where you know that it must not, right? I'll just come back to must be in a moment. But when you see a could be question, it means which of these could be possible, right? And if I want to say that this could not be possible, you see, if I want to eliminate a could be option, I basically want to say that it cannot be. That's what I want to say. I want to say it must not be, because if I cannot eliminate a must not option, it means that it could be. Let us say, what is your name? My name could be Amit. Let's say, okay, my name could be Amit. Now, if I want to eliminate this option, I need to show as to why my name cannot be Amit, right? That means if I want to eliminate one of these options or any of these options, right, then I have to see as to why this cannot be the right answer, why it cannot be. If I remain doubtful that whether it could be or could not be, it means that it becomes a possible right answer. However, when you see a must be question, you must compulsorily show that in every situation it works. So in a could be question, you're looking for a possibility, whereas in a must be question, you see a certainty. So when we go ahead and we see a must be question, we will address that. So at this point, when you see a could be question and you know you want to eliminate, right? At this point, your approach would be to just look at these options, to look at each of these and see which one of these things is impossible, right? If you can find something which is impossible, it means you can eliminate it. If you can eliminate it, eliminate it. Let's say this one becomes possible, for example. I'm not saying this is the answer, I'm just giving you an example. If it is possible, it means it could be. and then that becomes the right answer. So you get it? So you'll try to see as to which of these is impossible. The one that remains is possible, and what is possible is your answer. This is the approach. Now let's look at the questions one by one. It's very important for you to have this kind of clarity when you go ahead and solve these questions, okay? So let's have a look at option A. Now when you look at option A, you know for a fact that jazz has to be, okay, let's take the pointer. You look at 5 p.m. You have jazz and meditation in the beginning. That works because jazz is before yoga, and also meditation begins along with one more. So it looks okay. But then when you look at 7 and 8 p.m. here, when you see this 7 and 8 p.m., you know that after gymnastics you cannot have 2. You must have at the most 1, right? So because you have 2 here, you have both Kung Fu as well as tennis. It means that it violates this last rule, and therefore I will eliminate option A. It's impossible. Alright. So then we go to option B. Option B reads as jazz dance. Okay, that works. Meditation and tennis, that works. There's yoga. Yoga is after jazz, that works. There's gymnastics, okay. And here you see, this one is a mistake. Why? Because you saw that no other introductory class begins at the same time as gymnastics. Here Kung Fu is beginning along with gymnastics, and therefore I will eliminate option B as well. Okay, so we've eliminated A, we've eliminated B. Let us have a look at the option C. As you can see here, it says jazz in the morning, okay, along with meditation, so you've satisfied that. Here you have yoga. Yoga is after jazz dance, and then you have Kung Fu as required. Kung Fu is later than yoga, tennis, gymnastics. So this looks good for the time being. Let me keep this. Let me go ahead and look at option D. When I look at option D, it reads as jazz dance and tennis. That's possible in the morning. Oh, meditation has gone wrong, because we knew that whenever you see meditation, there has to be one more thing along with it, because meditation begins at the same time as exactly one other introductory class, and therefore I can eliminate option D as well. Let's look at our final option, option E. It says that 5 p.m. tennis and yoga, 6 p.m. jazz. Okay, so we've got that wrong, because we know that yoga begins later than jazz, but here yoga has begun before jazz. Therefore I can eliminate this. So as you can see, the process of elimination has helped you arrive at your answer. Okay, so remember that when you have a could be question where you have to see whether something could be, you basically look for an impossibility, and everything which is impossible gets eliminated. This is possible, and therefore it remains as the right answer. Let's proceed to our next question. Okay, so pause the video and try solving question 20 by your own self before you listen to my explanation. Alright, so let's solve this together. As you can see, meditation is scheduled to begin later than tennis, right? And as you know, whenever you see meditation, you would also have one slot empty along with it, okay? Also, there are a few things you should remember. As you know that it says that meditation would always have one. Likewise, we saw that gymnastics would never have anything. What that means is that it is possible. It could be that tennis has something along with it. It is possible that yoga could have something along with it. It is possible that Kung Fu could have something along with it. It is possible that jazz could have something along with it, right? Because this has not been eliminated. It's not been told to you that they do not, right? Also, meditation has exactly one, which means tennis could have 2, yoga could have 2 perhaps, Kung Fu could have 2 or 3. So when nothing has been specified, it is important for you to keep these possibilities open, right? So you only take for granted what has been spelt out to you specifically. If it has not been spelt out to you, in your mind, keep all options open. More so when you're doing a question which asks which could be true. right? So when you're doing a could be true question, you are trying to keep open all the possibilities, right? So what we will do here is we will try to eliminate the options. How? By trying to see if it is an impossibility. So we try to see, is A impossible? Let us say it turns out to be possible. Then we retain it. If it turns out to be impossible, we eliminate it. We go to option B. Does it turn out to be possible? If it is possible, then it's the answer. If not, we eliminate, and so on. Alright, so what we'll do now is we'll go option by option and try to prove and try to see if these are impossible. Also, in this timing that I have kept here between tennis and meditation, it does not say that it begins immediately later than tennis. It says it begins later, which means it's possible that something could be here in between it. It's possible that there could be two things between it. You don't know, right? So we just take what is told to us. We keep a certain distance between them, remembering the fact that perhaps we might have to write something in here, right? So we just keep that idea with us. In fact, we could, even to be safe, increase the distance between this, right? So you know that you can perhaps leave some space for entering anything else that you have to. Now we go option by option. Let us say we say jazz begins later than meditation. Okay, suppose I put jazz after meditation, right? Now what that means is that surely yoga will also be after meditation, and kung fu will either be with it or later, okay? And we know that after all of this, we will have, let's just place kung fu with it for the time being, and I'll tell you why afterwards in a moment. And you know that after this, you would surely have gymnastics, because gymnastics cannot be before all of this, because if gymnastics were before, then you would have to have something after it, and gymnastics cannot have more than one after it. Now let's see a problem. Look at the number of time slots. Let us say this is the first time slot, second, third, fourth and fifth. If we were to start at 5, 6, 7, 8, this becomes 9 o'clock. Or if we were to finish at 8 o'clock, this would be 4 o'clock, which is not possible. So as you can see, it's taking more time slots than are permissible, right? And since it's taking more time slots than are permissible, this is impossible. Also, I'll tell you why I did not write kung fu here. If I had written kung fu here, in between this, then you would have had a 7th time slot, right? So we are here trying to see if it is in any way possible. So I'm trying to minimize the number of time slots. But despite my efforts to minimize the time slots, it is still taking at least 5 time slots, and therefore I will have to eliminate option A. So as you can see, we are not looking at exact timing because the options do not talk of timing. But then to remember the number of time slots is very important. Let's look at option B. Okay, so we start off with the same thing. We have tennis here and we have meditation here. We want to try to see whether we can fit this into 4 time slots. Okay, that's the objective. And if we cannot fit it into 4 time slots, then we have to eliminate the option. Okay, so kung fu begins later than gymnastics. So let us say we have kung fu, and obviously gymnastics will have to be before it. And as you know, since after gymnastics you can have only one, it means there's nothing along with gymnastics, there is nothing along with kung fu. Now you have got your 4 slots already. Is it possible for us to put in jazz and yoga within these 4 slots? Let us see. Suppose I put jazz here and I put yoga here. It satisfies all the criteria. Since you see yoga begins later than jazz, and kung fu is no later than yoga. So all of these conditions are satisfied, which means that this is a possibility, and therefore I will retain B as a possible option. Let's look at the next option, option C. Okay, when you look at option C reads as meditation begins later than kung fu. Okay, so if meditation begins later than kung fu, it means perhaps kung fu, let me just put it here, since I don't exactly know the distance between tennis, I don't know whether, let's say if tennis is here, kung fu could be here or kung fu could be here, I can't really say. So for the sake of safety, I'll just place kung fu higher than meditation, alright, and I just keep it here so that we know it's higher, it's at a different time. but what exactly is the time is not something I can say, because you've not been told whether it is immediately later or immediately before. You don't know that, right? So for the sake of safety, I've kept it here. So it says meditation begins later than Kung Fu. Now what that means is that if Kung Fu is here, you know that perhaps yoga was along with it, okay? And if yoga was along with it, you know that jazz has to be before it. So either jazz could be along with this or jazz could be here. Like I said, my idea is to try to keep the number of slots as few as possible. So I'll keep this as few as I can. So I'll try to keep jazz along with tennis here. Let us say I keep jazz along with tennis, which means I take off jazz from here. So you have yoga and Kung Fu together here. You have tennis and jazz here, okay? And now you go for your final slot, which is that of gymnastics. So you have jazz beginning before yoga, Kung Fu along with yoga, but you can see that meditation is now vacant, okay? You need to place something along with meditation, right? Now, if you were to place something along with meditation, then you would realize that the number of slots would increase. So either you would have meditation with nothing, or you would have to increase the number of time slots. Let me show you how. Let us say if I were to now place, now you know that Kung Fu is before meditation, that means Kung Fu is here. Obviously yoga I can place, I cannot put yoga here because yoga would then be later than Kung Fu, so I can't put yoga here. What I can perhaps, so I'm left with nothing basically to put along with meditation, because all of these will have to be above it, and this criterion is not fulfilled, that there is exactly one other with this. Therefore I will have to eliminate option C as well, okay? Let's go to our next option. So you see, you have to be very aware of all of these options. For a moment, even I kind of missed out on being able to see this point, right? So you need to be very aware of all of the points while you're doing this. Let's look at option D. It says tennis begins later than Kung Fu. So you know you have tennis here, you have meditation here. It begins later than Kung Fu, it means Kung Fu is here. Now you know that obviously in this setup, if Kung Fu is here, I'm trying to minimize the slots, so let me put yoga here, there is jazz here. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 slots done. Where can you put gymnastics? Gymnastics will have to be at the end, which is the 5th time slot, and therefore I will have to eliminate option D as well, because you cannot have 5 time slots, okay? So we've eliminated option D as well. Finally we take option E. It says tennis begins later than yoga, so you have tennis, meditation, yoga is here. If yoga is here, you know jazz is here. Again, you know that although you can put Kung Fu here, you will need one more time slot for gymnastics. So the moment you do that, you have exceeded the number of time slots permissible. So even option E is eliminated, leaving B as the answer. Okay, let's go ahead to the next question. Take a moment to solve this question by your own self, pause the video, and then we'll solve this together. First, you need to understand as to what this question means. Let us say you have the 4 time slots, 5, 6, 7, and 8. It says, which is the only introductory class? Which of these is the only class that could begin at 5 p.m. Which means, let us say the answer should be 1, that if this is here, there is only 1, which means there is nothing along with it, right? If there is something along with this, it means it's not a possible right answer, which means that it has to satisfy 2 criteria. First, that it can be the first. Second, that it has to be alone. That's what it means. The only class to begin at 5 o'clock. So let's see as to what, let's try to eliminate the options one by one. So let us see if, one of the first things that I can eliminate is meditation, as you know, because meditation always has to be accompanied by something, right? And if meditation is accompanied by something, if it's to be the only class, it means you're violating the rule. So I will straight away eliminate option C, because meditation is not possible. So I eliminate option C. Next, I can very simply eliminate gymnastics as well, because gymnastics can have only one class after it and nothing along with it, which means it is, but on every given day all 6 are required, which means you cannot begin with gymnastics either. Okay, we have eliminated gymnastics, we've eliminated meditation. Next, we can eliminate yoga, because yoga we know has to be after jazz. So if jazz, the earliest jazz can be is at 5 p.m, which means the earliest yoga can be is at 6 p.m. So yoga cannot be a 5 p.m. class, and therefore I eliminate yoga as well. That leaves us with Kung Fu and tennis. If you look at Kung Fu is either along with yoga or after it, and you know that before yoga there has to be jazz. Therefore Kung Fu also can begin earliest at 6 p.m. Kung Fu cannot be a 5 p.m. class, and that leaves us with the answer tennis. Right? Very simple. Elimination is the key to solving questions such as these. As you could see, it was a simple question as soon as you start using the process of elimination. Okay, so we are here to the final question of this set. As you can see, this is a question on 6 p.m. We had a bit of a discussion about 6 p.m. in the previous question as well. Take a moment, pause the video, try solving it by your own self, and then I'll explain this to you. Okay, so when we were solving the previous question, we did see that Kung Fu could be a 6 p.m. class. We saw that, and but let's not factor that in. Let's look at the options one by one. You see, you're looking here now. You have to be fast as well. We can't be mechanically going through all the options. If I were to be a little wise, okay, we are asking as to which one cannot be a 6 p.m. class, right? So we are looking for something which has to be at the end. And when you look at the option A, gymnastics, we know that gymnastics requires to be somewhere at the end, right? We start off with this. Let us say, what if gymnastics were given as option E? Would you really start with first trying to see jazz, then seeing Kung Fu, then meditation, then tennis, and then going to gymnastics? No. As you can see, gymnastics already looks like the most likely answer. We'll just try to confirm the likely looking answer. Like I said, not always should you be using elimination. You sometimes have to use anticipation. And in this case, I will not eliminate this for you. I will use anticipation, because I think it's quite reasonable for us to anticipate gymnastics. And then what do? You go with an anticipation, and then you try to confirm or cross-check your anticipation. So what I'll do in this question is that I'll not look at the other options. I go with my anticipation, and my anticipation is gymnastics. So let us say if I place gymnastics at 6 p.m. Okay, so you have 5 o'clock here. I have gymnastics placed here. There is nothing along with it, and there can be only one slot at 7. At 8 o'clock, that even that can't happen, because you know that after gymnastics there can be only one. Now, what can I put here? Let us say I put jazz here. If I put jazz here, then yoga would need to go to another time slot. Let us say, okay, I put, but yoga cannot be here, so I take it down even further. I put yoga here. Now I can put Kung Fu also along with it here. That's possible. But the question is now, where do I place meditation? Can I place meditation along with anything anywhere? There is no time slot left. If I were to place yoga here, then jazz would go above this 4 o'clock. It would go up to 3 o'clock or something, which means that it is unworkable, which means that I have been able to confirm my anticipation, and therefore I will mark gymnastics A as the answer. All right. So I hope you got an idea. This was a pretty tough question, and since we have done a few questions already, I wanted you to have a look at this question. Also, I've shown you the method in detail. We saw that we have two methods. The first method is that of elimination. The second method is that of anticipation, and you need to learn to use these two methods to your best advantage. The more you practice, the more you'd be able to see as to which method would work for you, and you'd be able to quite intuitively get the right answer with more ease. If you have any questions, you can ask me in the comment section, and I'd be happy to help. I hope this video was of use to you. Thank you so much.